everyone. So we live in a modern world of hashtags, so I'm going to tell you my hashtag for the morning. Dale Whittaker, hashtag places of purpose. I created a hashtag for Nancy that is High Church Transfer Tuesday. So thank you for that, Nancy. That's really wonderful. So one of the things that Jason didn't mention that I think is important is that when Dr. Howard and Dr. Jones and I spoke on the phone about this, we talked about the fact that each of us could talk about our pathway programs, and we're very proud of the work that we've done with our respective programs. They have a lot in common. They have some differences. We have successes. But wouldn't it be really nice if we actually approached it from a place of gaps and maybe the what's next? What's bothering us? You know, what are some things that when we do a little bit of a deeper data dive, right, we find the data elements, what are we finding that we really have to pay attention to? And so really that is the purpose of this particular piece of the program. So this might be a little animated, a little oddly, and I'm going to probably go a little bit different than I had planned because it's hard for me to see. But what I wanted to start with was give you a snapshot of our transfer student enrollment and headcount for fall semester, fall 18, right? And so you can see in the top left that most of our students are transferring in from local colleges, and primarily for FIU, that is Miami-Dade College, Broward College, and Palm Beach State College. And I think that we have representatives from all of those. There's a nice contingency here of Miami-Dade. I hope Broward is in the house and all that. And we have partners also with Florida Keys. So if you're here, awesome. But what I do want to point out is on the right side of the top slide is looking at a little bit of a partial data that we have on racial and ethnic background. And so the 14% African American really is something to think about. When you compare it this semester to our first time in college, we see that it's higher. That's not unusual. Our transfer students are contributing a great deal to our racial background at FIU, our racial demographic makeup in the campus. But when you compare the 14% to the 19% that is actually in Miami-Dade County alone, not metropolitan Miami that includes Broward and Palm Beach, that's way too low. That piece that Nancy talked about of we're not really getting the talent in our communities that we need, that is a gap that we are working on and that we have to continue to work on. Even from the transfer perspective, where again, they're coming in and helping with that demographic with our students. So what did we do about it and what are we doing about it? So FIU partnered with the Education Effect, meaning, let me go back. Connect for Success partnered with FIU Education Effect, which is a partnership between FIU and Miami-Dade County Public Schools to actually increase the educational outcomes and meet some social needs of high schools across the county, but with special emphasis on those counties with high unemployment and low income. And for those of you who may know Miami, those three particular counties are Overtown, Little Haiti, and Liberty City. And in Overtown, for example, the unemployment rate is up to 20% compared to 8% in Miami-Dade County. Those counties also have a large number of African Americans and Hispanics and college-going age as well. And so in this particular case, what we did is that there's an arm of the Education Effect that is called the Golden Scholars. And the Golden Scholars are really some early college exposure, college readiness, advising, and expanded dual enrollment opportunities. And what they really looked at in the Education Effect is that they wanted to really work with African American students, and in particular males, to attend FIU as freshmen. And they've been fairly successful in the model, but I do say fairly as the operative word. And so one of the things that we thought about 2 years ago is why don't we think about what it means to put students and have them go on the pathway of Connect for Success. If we know that transportation can be a problem, that income can be a problem, and these situations that can serve as barriers that we may not be thinking about, especially that family piece that Nancy talked about, getting away from the communities, getting away from family, but having those responsibilities and then being very far away from those communities by being on our campuses. And so Connect for Success allows them to start at the state college, complete the AA, and transition over. And that seems to be, I think, a model that can be used for some of the students. Not all of the students, for some of the students. So in the last 3 years, we've gone from 4 students in Connect for Success to 50 to 89 this year. And so we're very proud of that and really need to go in and continue to hone that message and help us with those communities and make sure that we're not letting that talent really just slip away from us. Our students are dynamic, they're interesting, they're diverse. We look at a student like Arlene to the left, who is an 82-year-old returning transfer student. And so thinking about how we work with returning adult learners, and yes, she's a bit of an outlier, but she was really good at telling us all the things that we were doing wrong, right? All the things we needed to do, and she's on our second largest campus, and the fact that she had no transportation to engage in a ton of great things that were going on main campus is eye-opening, right? And to tell a student, which she was told, oh, you can take Uber, was not acceptable to Arlene. Okay, we have Obnir, who came from Georgia State, and Obnir is actually a musician, moved to Miami from Georgia to pursue his music career at the same time as he's finishing his IT, and he also has a group of students where they're doing a startup. I mean, a very different student, than we had 10 and 20 years ago. And then Brianna and Stephanie. Brianna came from Miami-Dade College and looking for an honors college experience and looking for very specific experiences at FIU when she transferred, and leadership opportunities and internships. And Stephanie, who's here with us today, really going from the Broward College to actually finishing up her graduate degree today. So she has the benefit now of hindsight and of sharing with us what that journey was like. One thing that really resonated with me from what Nancy talked about is this idea of deficit model, right? And so in advising, we know that we do a good job at the traditional pieces of advising, and that can be anywhere from what you know and the knowledge of majors, but your active listening skills, your motivating skills. A high-impact advisor really has a magic to be able to help students point to optimal choices and really changing their lives. And so we have spent the last year and a half or so going through what we call strengths-based training for our advisors. So maybe think of this as a little combination of traditional advising and maybe a little coaching, but the essence of this is about using advising's relational core as a way to think about what are the strengths that our students coming in with that we're not necessarily acknowledging and that they themselves don't see as strengths that can be leveraged to meet the goals that they need to meet in order to be successful in college and beyond. And so you can see really through the grid what that means. And what strengths-based advising challenges us to do is rather than starting at the point of the problem, you start with the status quo. And what that could look like in an advising session is if you get a degree audit from a student who has 3 B's and an F, you start with a conversation about the B's. And how amazing is it, what happened in these 3 courses where you did so well? Or when you go through a situation where a student has a hurdle, you could ask a question of that student as, tell me something that, a time that you've been in a conflict or a situation and how did you solve it? And so based on that solution, you can have that student consider how that solution can be actually used in these spaces in college, in a classroom, speaking to a faculty, having an issue with a roommate. I mean, it's a little bit of a shift in thinking. We've been working on it for about a year and a half. Our advisors have been pleased and saying, yeah, I'm starting to use it a little bit more. I'm not always coming from this place of deficit. And that's another piece that we're really proud of that we want to continue to build. And it's taking advantage of those amazing strengths that our students are coming in with that are, let's say, not considered in the past as strengths. So they're multilingual, they're resilient, they have grit. They navigate multiple spaces and some spaces where they're not necessarily desired, where they're felt as less than, and they can navigate that and make it work. And they're contributors of their communities, they're workers. And so all of these things that students bring with that, we just haven't taken advantage of that. And a shout out to FIU faculty and through Gateway coursework that I know is going on in our respective schools, we've also been looking at culturally responsive teaching and what does that look like? What does that look like for that student in a classroom? And so I think together it's going to be, Nancy, I'm hoping a new world for us, in staying away from the deficit model, if you will. The other piece is that with Connect for Success, we spend a lot of time talking about building the college-going identity and having the 4-year identity is what we call it at FIU. So we do that by giving students the actual Panther ID card. They can go to events on campus, athletic games, use the library, all of those good things so that they step foot on campus way before they're there and they start feeling as part of the community of FIU. And what students tell us is that ultimately, not only does it make them feel like part of FIU, but it kind of reduces a little bit of the transfer fear. You know, the lure of the big classes and all of those things just start slowly but surely dissipating because they know the campus and they feel like already they're a little bit part of it. What we're working on now, though, is a little bit interesting. We're expanding that to what it means to have identity to your discipline. And so the earlier you find your major, and the earlier you can actually have an experience with that major, where what you think that major is and what the reality is can actually get a little bit more congruent, is really powerful for students. And this work has been happening, I would say, maybe at least from my readings, a decade or so, primarily with STEM. And so we're trying to expand that in a couple of interesting ways. These grants that I'm going to share with you very quickly are in partnership with Miami-Dade College. The first one is the STEM Pathways Grant coming out of the Dell Foundation. And here we're focusing on STEM students, particularly biology and engineering. And this is where the data elements really help and the refinement helps. We know that transfer students positively actually impact our excess credit hours, right, in a very good way. But when we looked at biology majors and engineering majors, look at that percentage. It's 36? 36% versus 18% of every other major combined. That's a problem, right? And so if we just focus on, yes, we're doing this with excess hours, and we don't dive in a little bit, this is a problem. And so this grant, through design thinking, modeling, prototyping, we've worked for an entire year without even actually prototyping anything just yet, having conversations about, on the Miami-Dade side, contextualizing their most common course, intermediate algebra. How do you contextualize that for STEM students? Is it offering different examples? Is it doing other things, you know, that may be interesting for them to start thinking about why math and science are so critical to STEM degrees? Student life skills courses, your SLS, can you actually create some, and I know Miami-Dade has done that successfully, is create some that are specific to certain majors so that, again, you're having that conversation with advisors, with your faculty member about that major early on. And then at the end, we're really right now still prototyping this idea of creating an interactive map that brings in the requirements of general education and, you know, what Miami-Dade has in terms of the STEM piece, those first 2 years, and then adding in FIU's next 2 years, but together. Right now they exist in separate spaces, so it's about bringing those together and then actually adding very interactive features into that potential website or application where a student can see in semester 1, I can have this, you know, opportunity to do A, B, C, and D, including undergraduate research, creating a set of milestones for students, and things that they can really follow. The beauty of this 1 year is that we have involved students in every piece of the puzzle. And so students have come to us and said, I don't think we would do that. I don't think we would use that app if it looked that way. I want to actually tailor it to me like I can do with every other app. I mean, we're like, oh God, you know, bring on more grant money, right? But they're right. This is how they navigate all their spaces, is by saying, this is Janie's page. And Janie only cares about what Janie cares about, so I don't need to see everything else. So they're really challenging us to rethink, you know, how we work with them. The next piece is the Humanities Edge. This is more of an experiential pathway. Mellon Grant, very interesting. Mellon Foundation, very interested in how we're supporting or not our humanities majors. And if you read anything in the news, you know that that's been the target of lots of articles, and humanities are dead and don't bother and those kinds of things. People sometimes just forgetting that people have passions for disciplines and that matters as much as other things. And so here, what we really actually are working on is we created a bridge program. It's a small program for now. It's maybe about 60 to 70 students who are interested in the humanities and planning already to transfer to FIU. And here we spent this summer, I think it was about a week, with students and faculty, Monday through Friday, working on what was called the Forgotten History of Miami. So this allowed all of these students to bring in personal familial artifacts and work with faculty on digital humanities work, archiving this information, linking it to the history of Miami, but the history of where this archive, this project, this photo, this hat, whatever it is that this student brought in, and made it very meaningful. And ultimately what it did is added the voice of history of that student to the mix. And so when we asked students, what was this like, and we surveyed them and we had, opportunities to chat with them, the number one theme that came out of that was confidence. I have confidence in my research skills. I didn't know I could do that. I have confidence in critical thinking. I have confidence that I actually have a pathway in the humanities. And the humanities isn't just what my family and friends are saying, it's teaching it in school. There are actually very new emerging areas in humanities that I can pursue. And it was awesome to be with all these humanities majors and kind of finding my people that have the passion like I have it. And so that's very meaningful. One of the departments took an extra step, which I loved. I don't know how scalable this is, but they brought actually the students into a day of history at FIU and allowed students to choose one of 3 lectures to sit in. So what does it feel like to sit in a lecture for upper division students, a junior or senior level class, so that they can get the experience of being an upperclassman, for a day at FIU, along with other activities. And so you see the different thread between the 4-year identity, but now what does my discipline look like and feel like? One of the pleasures that I have at FIU is to work with faculty. And boy, if there's one that keeps me on my toes is the one that I'm going to have her do the last slide very quickly. Largest major at FIU for transfers for everybody, psychology. And Dr. Nichols Lopez is one that will come to me with ideas and say, I think this is not working as well, but here's the difference. Not how are you going to fix it, how are we going to fix it? What can I do to help? How can I get my faculty involved? How can I get our advisors involved? And so I'm going to have her talk a little bit about her efforts in psychology.